Welcome to this edition of Insights with Ovationz. I am your host, Aaron Ellis. You can find me at aaronellisofficial.com, as well as all my social media is Aaron Ellis Official. Today, I'm joined by another Aaron, Aaron Mastny. Did I say that right, Aaron?
Yeah, you did.
All right. So Aaron is the founder of Inner Alchemy and CEO of Realty. He has a passion for helping people from all walks of life overcome anxiety, depression, and past trauma, and really working with generational trauma and how it affects people. So welcome to the podcast, Aaron. I would love to hear a little bit about how you got to where you're at. Like, how's that journey led you to what you're doing? And then we could just dive into whatever rabbit hole comes up.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, I appreciate you, being a part of this conversation, Aaron, and it's always great to meet another Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron is something we hear a lot, but how I ended up being here, I'm 48. I currently live in Greenville, South Carolina, but why I'm here and why I do what I do is because of the trauma that I experienced when I was a little kid. And I experienced sexual trauma, which caused me to try to get away from that pain for years. So whether it was heroin, I was a heroin addict in my 19 and early 20s. And I also was addicted to sex. I was addicted to drugs. I was addicted to anything and everything, gambling, anything you can imagine to get away from my pain. We call it state changing, because I didn't know how to process those thoughts, feelings, and emotions within myself. It got to the point where one of my best friends, my first wife, her brother passed when he was 19. And I went to go speak at a funeral in Provo City, Utah, which is where he passed, that I finally stopped my heroin addiction. I was 24 at the time, but it didn't stop my pain or my shame. And so I'd say for the past 24 years, I've been working to resolve and figure out how to come back to my authentic, true self. So that's kind of a short story about why I'm here, why I do what I do.
Wow. So basically, first half of your life, I love how you frame this, because the 24 years, it's literally, I'm like, oh, that's half his life. And now half his life, he's been working on putting the pieces back together. You could say that we're somewhat broken, right?
Yes.
I really love that you touched on some topics that I personally can relate to. I can personally relate to sexual trauma in my past. I can also relate, I can't relate to necessarily drug addictions, but I can relate to addiction and the desire to numb and move away from through a vice, right? To avoid and whatnot. So I love the fact that you are doing something with something you've actually experienced. I think that is extremely important in this day and age. And all the speaking that I do, as well as all of the speaking and the experts, I'm going to use air quotes for that are out there right now that haven't necessarily experienced this stuff, that it brings to a whole different level of understanding to the table when you're helping people, and a whole different level of, you could say, even empathy and compassion when you've gone through it and been there and done that, right? So I have a few curiosities just from a little looking into you before we hopped on here, but can you speak towards generational trauma and how it affects people? I don't quite understand when I was reading that. I wonder what he means by generational trauma, because I think of like past generations, right, and how it trickles down potentially. So when you say generational trauma, what are you speaking towards?
So a lot of times, so when we're born, right, we're born into an environment, and from 0 to 7, we're in this like theta brainwave state. We're literally hypnotized. Beta's like right now, we're in the beta, like waking mind. Alpha is like if I drop into like relaxation, I can relax into an alpha brainwave state. Theta, right when you wake up and right before you go to bed, you're in a dreamlike state. And so if you think about when you're a child, you're absorbing all of this information to learn how to walk, talk, all these things. The challenge is we're very well egocentric. Our consciousness hasn't evolved to the point where we can process our emotions and feelings. So what happens is we make us the identity of like what's happening with, especially our caregivers, our mother and our father, or whoever took care of us. So if dad comes home and he had a bad day and he was angry at me, I'm not like, oh, dad had a bad day at work, blah, 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 blah. I'm thinking I did something wrong. I'm not good enough. I don't matter. There's 7 core limiting beliefs that I learned from this guy, Dr. Pratt. He's a hypnotherapist. He talks about all 45,000 of his clients had 1, 2, in my case, all 7 of these core limiting beliefs. These are what we make who we think we are. Things like I am alone. I don't trust other people. I don't trust myself. I am powerless. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not safe. And so there's 2 things that happen. We're looking for love and safety as a child. as an experience. But as soon as we experience pain, there's 4 inevitabilities in life: pain, there's adversity, we don't know what the next moment's going to bring, there's uncertainty, and we all experience loss, right? This body is going to dissipate at some point. But when I experience that pain, I have fear of that pain. I don't want to experience that again. So if mommy didn't give me love, or she didn't even give me a cookie, and I make up a story, I'm not lovable, which is a core limiting belief, that's my trauma. And everybody's trauma is individual to their experience and what they've gone through. So what the interesting part is, we pick up parts to try to get away from that trauma, which becomes a habit. These become our addictions. So things like overachiever, I got to do more to get love and acceptance. People pleaser, I got to please people to get love, acceptance, and approval. Overthinker, we overthink things. Controller, controlling things to get what? Love and safety. Perfectionist, I got to do it right. And so these are energy depleting psychologies that aren't bad, but they took over when we were kids. They become our habits, right? And so as we grow up and we become a teenager, we can now process things differently. Where you are today, Aaron, where I am today, I'm at 48. So what I teach a therapeutic coaching model. I help you access the resources that you have, because you have wisdom, insight, understanding, to go back into your subconscious to resolve the pain of the past, so you could be what? Present, and put your attention where it matters most. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense to me. This is actually amazing. Now, let me tell you a couple questions that popped up as I went, or thoughts too, that I want to see what direction you go in. One of the things that I have understood about addiction, and let me give a personal experience on that. I grew up in the music industry. I grew up with a buffet of drugs in front of me from a very young age, but I never took drugs. I never even smoked a cigarette, let alone a joint, right? At that time, I didn't have my first drink until I was in my 20s, which was really odd for people. Like, how is that possible? Because not only was I not the normal, younger kid or youth, I was also in front of a buffet in an industry that was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right?
Right.
So as I've tried to intellectualize these things, like, I'm one who believes that there is reasons for everything, but everything doesn't happen for a reason. Meaning there's a plethora of reasons. So I'm not just looking for a reason for relief, right? I'm like, so sometimes like, well, maybe it's because I just love my life. I'm like, oh, okay. Or maybe it's because, and people will grab onto one of the reasons I give. Oh, it's because of that. Oh, there wasn't alcohol in his house when he grew up. That's why, you know what I mean? But that's not really it. It comes from a different space for me. And I'm curious. And so along those roads, just to be transparent, like, when I was younger, like, where the norm was cocaine to wake up and alcohol to go to sleep, and for musicians, I would utilize ephedra and Valium, in my younger days, because I needed to sleep and I needed to wake up. And I would experience the physical addictions, but I didn't have the mental and emotional ones where I could literally come home, understood how to let go of it. I could let go of it very quickly, right? Because I was using it for a specific purpose, not to avoid what I was going on. And I'm not saying people should look at drugs like, oh, if I can do it to enhance what I'm doing, great, let's do it. That's not what I mean. But I utilized it to help me through my circumstances, but not in a way to avoid. And I started to learn that addiction is addiction. And this is where I want a question comes to you, and how you've dealt with this, or if you have dealt with this. A lot of people, their neural pathways, their paradigms, when they hear addiction, they think of drugs, they think of alcohol, they think of sex, they might start to branch into gambling, but they're not necessarily thinking of shopping. They're not necessarily thinking of binging Netflix. They're not necessarily thinking of overthinking and people pleasing and those things that are truly have become addictions as well. So how are you speaking towards that? How are you helping break down that barrier where people are like, oh, I'm not an addict because I'm not addicted to A, B, C, or D, which is what I've been told are addiction, the addictions. How have you worked with that? What's arising for you on that?
Well, and so, being a human being on this planet, our mind is designed to try to we're driven to get away from our pain. So our mind is designed to make the conscious subconscious and just make it a habit, so we don't have to deal with it. So in a way, it's not a bad thing to be an addict. The thing is that most of us are compounded and addicted into our core limitations and our beliefs that are coming from our past. So it's just been embedded into us. And that's what, going back to generational trauma, alcoholism is not the problem. Alcohol, heroin, morphine is not the problem. The problem is the pain that I took, that like forgiveness is resolving the emotions other people put inside of me. So for example, if my mom was in stress, fight, flight, or freeze, if she was angry, frustrated, rageful, worry, doubt, anxiety, fear, and she was in those states, I picked up those states because I was absorbing it. Then I picked up a pattern to try to get away from it. That becomes the addiction. It's the addiction to get away from the pain that keeps me stuck in the habit. And then I just reward the habit is I get to reward, I get to be right. My mind is trying to prove itself to be right. I get to be right about what? I'm right that I'm not worthy. I'm right that I'm alone. And we just keep repeat. It's called a maladaptive stress response. Like to me, science proves God. Science, when you understand the biological part of this 3D world that we're living in, God consciousness is coming from full consciousness is in my opinion, coming from like a frequency. It's a vibration. You know, if you ever read David R. Hawking's Power versus Force, he talks about the levels of consciousness. At the highest level is 1,000 frequency. Then we're born into this reality. And when we're surrounded by this body, our heart, our mind, this is how we experience our consciousness, is through the body. Now, the lowest level of consciousness is what? Shame. It's a vibrational frequency of 20. It's not bad or wrong, but shame is an interpretation of my pain.
Yeah.
So if my parents had pain and shame, I took on that pain and shame, and then I took a habit to try to get away from it, but that's what's keeping me stuck in it. And so the way to freedom is not out, it's in. Right. So you hear all the great sages and all the teachers, Jesus Christ and Buddha, it's in, but most of my attention is geared what? The whole world is one big distraction trying to get me away from what? My internal pain. But if I use an external substance, person, place, thing to get rid of that pain, I'm now dependent on that external thing. I haven't resolved it within myself. That's it.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
oh my gosh, you and I could literally talk for days. Okay.
Sure.
So we it sounds like we teach the same things. We live the same things.
Yes.
I love this. I'm loving this. This is an awesome conversation. So you mentioned something. I look for threads. I'm very present when I'm listening. And I've noticed you say when you reference these things like shame, or you reference some of the other aspects that you went through, the 7 things that people experience, where you talk about the doctor, like 2 or 3 of them everybody had, but you had all 7.
Sure.
You've constantly said it's not bad or wrong. And then you go on. I understand that. Yet I know that in my conversations with people, they don't necessarily even hear me say that the first several times, because it just doesn't register, because they're used to categorizing everything as good, bad, right, or wrong. Right.
We're programmed into that conversation.
I personally live from a place of non-duality. That's where I come from, and that's where I see how I see the world. Now I can understand the dualities that people subjectively place on us, or place out there, and how they look at it. But I come from a place where there's no good, bad, right, or wrong. Ultimately, when you're zoomed out. So I notice you're saying that consistently. So I'm curious if that is a purposeful thing, or if that's just something that is a natural part of your flow now. And if you do have an intention there in helping shift that paradigm of the bucketing of good, bad, right, or wrong, and how that plays out in somebody's anxiety and depression, let's say.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that you picked up on that. I'm intentionally saying that because the guilt and the shame that most of us are carrying is coming from a place of like, shame is like, I am wrong. Guilt is like, I did something wrong.
Yeah.
But shame is like, it's like the ultimate illusion that I am powerless to this shame and pain. But because it's so uncomfortable, it's just a sensation. Emotions are feelings. And so the way I look at emotions, it's God, it's divine intelligence has given us an internal feedback loop to do what? To pay attention to my anxiety, to pay attention to my depression, to pay attention. But most of us, because it's uncomfortable, we're driven to get away from it. So it's nobody's fault, meaning mom's pain and shame was passed down from her grandmother, who didn't know how to resolve her emotions. We're not taught how to be with our emotions and feelings. It's not like in our curriculum. So if I don't learn the game of how to be with my emotions, which is what most of us are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and if I'm driven to habitually get away from that, I'm resisting God. I'm resisting myself. I'm resisting all that is. I'm not in acceptance of it. Yeah. And so heaven and hell is in all of us. It's a choice away. We're choosing to try to get away from hell, from the uncomfortable emotions and sensations, which is not allowing us to resolve it. There's something called the observer effect. You ever listen to like Mickey Singer? He talks about where when you start to become the witness of your own experience and start to realize that you have the ability and the consciousness to resolve all of it, you don't need your mom or dad to resolve your pain and trauma. You can resolve it by going into your subconscious. Now, most people don't go into their subconscious because their conscious mind is so busy protecting them from that, because that's what it's been programmed to do. Hence, overachiever, people pleaser, overthinker, all of that stuff. So those aren't bad or wrong either. They're just out of balance. Like, so when you get stressed out, I get stressed out and something triggers me, we double down on our patterns, our habits, our protective strategies. That's in our conscious mind, but 95% of my life is my subconscious. So a lot of therapy and coaching, they deal a lot of, and not to talk bad about any of those other, most people though are dealing with the conscious mind. What I've been learning and doing and diving into is how to resolve the subconscious. And that's where the magic happens. Because once you go in and once you learn that you have the resources, Aaron, or anyone listening here, that you have the ability to go into your subconscious and resolve it, you transmute your trauma, you alchemize it. You take your pain, becomes your power, becomes your purpose. Now, if I'm ignoring that, I'm ignoring my greatest gift. But because it's so uncomfortable, we spend our whole life running away from ourselves, which in my opinion, we're running away from God. We're running away from divine intelligence. We're not in alignment with our own frequency because of the uncomfortable, because of the body. But if I don't resolve the uncomfortable sensations in my body, I stay stuck trying to get away from them. Guess what? I'm going to live in hell for the rest of my life. And I've lived there. I've been there. So trust me, I tried getting away for it a long time. Yeah.
It's funny, when I was reading and just looking into you and stuff before we got on, I saw the term and the words inner alchemy. And any title that I've ever had, like, somebody's given to me. Like, I've never really been a title person like that. And one of the things that somebody called me years ago was the alchemist of inspiration. And I'm like, or an inspiration alchemist. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, well, every single thing that I've brought to you or seen you, other people bring to you, you immediately see it from a positive, inspiring perspective. Like, there's no even path to get there for you. It's just where you see it. And so they came up with that. So I was like, but from what you're talking about, I see it from the inside out rather than the outside in.
Yes.
And this is really, really cool. I just because of time and stuff, and because I know where I'm going to have you on again, because we could go on and on. Like,
sure. Yeah. I'm happy. Right? Yeah.
I'm curious, just because this question has been asked of me, I know how I've answered it, but who are you specifically currently targeting to work with? Do you have a specific demographic that you're working with? Because honestly, my perspective is everybody needs what you're doing, right? Yes. But do you have somewhere where you're honing in right now? Or it could be that life has presented to you and created that group of people.
Man, God, it's so interesting. It's a great question. So when I first started, I've been coaching for like close to a decade now. I was a lead distributor for this other company where we sold superfoods and medicinal mushrooms like reishi, shiitake, lion's mane. My wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. We just got married after 5 years. She was the second lead distributor. And in 2021, that went away, meaning like my calling, God, it was hard because I had a team of 2,000 people and I was like, wow, like I really love that community. But for some reason, something was carrying me forward to the next part of my own realization. And then I started coaching people, but I realized like, it doesn't matter. You can give everyone the secret to everything, but they don't take act. They self-sabotage. And so that's when I started diving into the subconscious stuff. And then it's led me to this therapeutic coaching path. And as I get deeper within my own consciousness, the people that I've been serving lately, I'm launching my next Inner Alchemy group. I did a presentation for the Entrepreneurial Organization. It's a worldwide organization. I was introduced to this woman from Nashville, Tennessee. She runs it in Nashville. Anyway, it's a worldwide organization, 17,000 people. And now it's a group of just high level. To be in that group, you have to be $1 million or more. It's a group of high level entrepreneurial women. But then I have also a group of men. I started coaching this one woman as a referral. And then I started working with her billionaire boyfriend. And now I just keep getting referrals. And so the call I had just before here is a professional retired baseball player who was driven by the criticism of his father, went to the World Series, one of the top batters in the major leagues, but he was driven by his pain. So the inner critic a lot of times creates amazing people like that have awesome results, but they still hasn't resolved their deep shame and pain. So I've been working with super high level human beings and the people that I serve, but I also serve parents that are bringing in their 19-year-old child because the pain of the child is they're doing sex, they're doing drugs. But I'm like, what about your trauma? And so then I help that. So I'm working with the parents and then the child. And so I work with the husband, then I work with the wife, and then I work with the child. Like it just all of a sudden, because we're all interconnected. So I've just learned to follow and trust God, universe, source, divine intelligence, whatever you want to call it, presents to me the next person that's ready to address this deep, dark pain and shame. And I have like the ability to give them the tools because it's not coming from me. I'm just guiding them to teach them so they can practice it themselves. So then they can start to realize there is a path out. There's a path out to all of it. And you're the one that holds it. The key. It's just, we haven't been, if you've never been taught and given those skill sets and capabilities, I can't imagine how I would learn how to resolve my subconscious mind if someone hadn't taught me how to start to do that within myself. You see what I'm saying?
I totally see what you're saying. So you can't imagine how to resolve this unless someone had taught you how to do this yourself. I think that honestly, just time-wise is a good place to stop too.
Yeah.
And I would say that is a good guide for people to go back and listen to this with that thought in mind. Think of like the fact that you literally just said in a very, very expressive way, I can't even imagine how I would have been able to do this if I didn't have somebody helping me with it, right? So having people go back and listen to this, and I know I'm going to have you on again. I've already decided that. We'll figure that out because we're just getting to know each other. And I absolutely believe in what you're doing, right? Beyond any sort of intellectual level. I think you know what I mean by that. So I am so much behind you to help get this out to the world and stuff. And I'm excited to do so. I've had chills massively during our conversation. So
I love it. Well, you know what's can I share, like I have free trainings and stuff on YouTube. Yeah.
Please. Yeah.
It's called Being the True You. If you just look up my name, Aaron Mastny, I have like a training that I did, a 4-step subconscious reset where I teach you about the 7 core limiting beliefs. I taught it to a high level men's group. And then I have 2 other trainings, how trauma is stored in our body and the 3 pillars of a maladaptive stress response. Those are free trainings where I'm teaching groups of entrepreneurs, highly successful people that are stuck. Like we're all stuck to the next level and limit of where we are. So if we can start to learn to accept ourselves, everything else also will start to come towards us as a way. Like the new earth, in my opinion, is the embodiment through me and through you. But that means I have to take responsibility for the things that a lot of us we're not paying attention to or resisting. So that's, or you could go check out my Instagram at I am Aaron U, and I have some content there, but really the YouTube channel. And I have a group that I just free for right now is just people can come in. I do a call once a month and I just talk about, and we just resolve stuff.
I love it, man. Very much a servant's heart, which of course is completely congruent and in integrity with everything we've been talking about. So
that's it, man. Just serving the next person. Yes.
Well, I honestly, it's been an honor and a blessing to have you on here. I look forward to having you on again. So I would love to have you just say thank you and goodbye to the audience for today.
Yes. Goodbye to anyone that's listening. There is a way out. And if you want to reach out to me, feel free to do so. And I'll see what I can do to help. Happy to do that.
You have been listening to another episode of Insights with Ovationz. You've had the 2 Aarons on today. So easy for you to remember who was on here today, and watch for other upcoming episodes, as well as we will be showcasing Aaron on Ovationz.com. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.